UNCG LIS 694. This is a short summary video on coaching copyright. As a school system district level media supervisor, we as librarians, which are usually in our background when we take on this position, we encourage creativity, promote intellectual curiosity, and we are examples of ethical use of resources. Under that umbrella is how we will approach copyright, and definitely we will not take on a legalistic role. That is the role of your school system lawyer. They are usually part of a professional legal association, and they can go to those other lawyers if there is a situation that they're not sure of is covered by one of your school system policies or by the federal copyright law. But our role basically is fivefold. One is to stay abreast of copyright guidelines and laws. You will know there are changes from our professional associations. Many of the educational journals as such also highlight articles or changes in copyright law. And obviously, your school system lawyer hopefully will alert you to other changes or situations that involve copyright. Also, don't be passive yourself, and make sure that if you hear of some possible guideline changes in copyrights, that you contact your lawyer and see if there is something that needs to be addressed in your school system. Two, you should have conversations about copyright. Be very proactive. Have those conversations before copyright situations occur where teachers have posted things on websites or uh, colleagues at central office have done system-wide copying or curriculum, um, multiple copies sent out to the schools. Also, have a conversation when you first get to central office with your lawyer, school system lawyer, and just ask them about how the school system has handled copyright issues in the past, and your supervisor, obviously, so that those chains of communication are open before a situation comes up. Examine the school system policy that addresses or um, talks about copyright that might be embedded in another policy, but usually it is a standalone copyright policy. And if you see anything that seems outdated or could be updated in a way that supports student learning in a creative way, definitely find out how policies are updated and start that process. Now, the actual copyright law still is quite dated. It's still from the 1970s with the updates with the digital learning in the early 2000s. So it will sound very print-based in the actual law itself and then you have to go to the digital um, learning or the digital copyright updates that do address some of the digital rights. Third thing, you will need to provide annual professional development for your school library media coordinators, possibly to larger groups or smaller groups throughout the school system, administrators, um, possibly to faculties in schools. Principals often would like someone from outside their school to be the one talking about copyright and giving the teachers an annual heads up on making sure they are ethical users of resources. Another point that you will need to be aware of is that you will need to focus on teaching students first, obviously, then teachers. So you, as the central office supervisor, will want to be able to focus on that instruction for students and encourage your school library media coordinators at the building level to be sure that that is included in all of their projects and or units of study as it goes along. Then the last thing is that you will be that point of contact for the district. First for your media coordinators, so that they have someone they can call and they say, my teacher needs or teacher's asking, um, this is what I think is, do you agree? That kind of thing. Principals often might call you also, particularly if they want to show a certain video that's for entertainment or rewards. And then obviously any of the scenarios that are unclear to you, then you go to your school system lawyer who then has another resource with their professional association. Don't dissect the copyright law, break it down into all its little parts. Either when you're talking about copyright to your school library media coordinators, they've had that in their building level or their, excuse me, in their program, master's programs. So you don't need to repeat everything that is already in your policy or in the copyright law that your school library media coordinators do remember. However, and you are going to remind them of the framework of the copyright law, possibly why it exists, and some of the finer points of particularly in the digital update in the early 2000s. And definitely don't present it as a list of don'ts, particularly when you're talking with classroom teachers. You're going to, want to have some scenarios after you've given an overview, and you want to be sure that you're providing resources and opportunities and suggestions for them to work around their particular request so that they're not um, abusing any copyright guidelines. Two resources that have been recently updated and that are fairly comprehensive and easy for you to use as a supervisor. The first one is Creative Commons for educators and libraries. And this is produced by ALA. And the part I like about the Creative Commons for educators and libraries, obviously, is all the ins and outs of the Creative Commons law, but it gives a good basic overview of fair use and why we have it. So it's a good resource to have at your fingertips. The other is Coaching Copyright, which is edited by Kevin Smith and Aaron Ellis. This is written it also is published by ALA. It is written and directed towards university libraries. However, everything they talk about coaching instructors and for us classroom teachers in the use of copyrighted materials inside and outside of a learning management system is very easy to interpret and pass that message down to um, classroom teachers in a coaching manner versus a legalistic manner. It also has some great graphics throughout that talk about the highlight the fair use, how you make different decisions along the way if it's fair use or not. And also, it is very extensive if you need an update on the actual copyright law and the philosophy behind it. So, those two things are fairly good to have at your fingertips if you feel like you need more of a base for copyright. Um, as the title of the second book suggests, you do want to approach your copyright situations as a coaching situation and begin by asking a series of questions rather than a yes or a no answer or giving your opinion right off the bat. First off, always, too, you're going to want to remind them that copyright is a school board policy, and so some of your questions may direct them back to that policy in terms of if they can use or not use the resources they're looking for. So one of the first questions I always asked was, why do you want to use this thing? What is it that you're trying to achieve? What are you trying to teach by using this copyrighted material? Also, then the second question would be, is there an obvious copyright owner? Can you tell if it's, a publisher, if it's a print resource, if it's a video? Can you tell if it's, you know, has a author, videographer, any kind of artist that's associated with it? Um, what is the source of that um, copyrighted material? Obviously, if it's a video, did you get it off of YouTube, off a person's website? Did you, film it yourself? Also, are there any Creative Commons license indications on the um, copyrighted resource? Um, the teachers often don't, and students don't often know the source of the illustration or the video or the piece of music or the print material. So if they got it off the internet, you're going to have to ask them to dig a little deeper. And is it off a website where it's obvious that it's part of an association? Is it teachers pay teachers, so they bought something off the from that source, and yet did that entitle them to then use it in a different way or to change it in some way or to further distribute that information? Um, is the source of that usually videos or music, does that give you the right then to use it further under a fair use guideline, or does it strictly prohibit that? Um, if it's off the internet, again, you've got to do a little more digging. Same with photographs and images. You're going to want to make sure that if it looks like they can use it in a fair use situation, you want to dig down a little bit more and see who the actual original artist is of it, and be sure to cite that in the instruction. Now, we are definitely as district level media supervisors, we are usually conferring on a situation in a classroom, resources that are used in a classroom situation. um, that is definitely um, much more comfortable in a fair use situation. Most of our situations fall under fair use if it's used within a lesson and it's um, contained just to that classroom. Those are very safe fair use guidelines and suggestions. So at this point, if the conversation with that teacher or administrator, you usually can determine if it's qualifies for fair use, or then if you do need to dig deeper and or get permission to use the source. Um, if it's got a Creative Commons notation, then obviously look at those various permissions and be sure that the teacher is using it within those boundaries. If you are inside the learning management system, whether it's Canvas or PowerSchool Learning, um, obviously you can use copyrighted materials within that because it is a closed classroom. So as long as that use is limited to that one course, that one classroom, that also gives our teachers a lot more latitude under a fair use kinds of situation. The Creative Commons licenses are legal licenses, so those hold a lot of weight if the creator of that resource has a Creative Commons license and they discover that you are a teacher are using it beyond the original parameters of what they wanted their resource to be used. Um, so that gives them the legal right to press charges and take things to court. And there have been many Creative Commons court situations ruled. And in the back of the Creative Commons book, there is a website. It talks about the different scenarios that have been challenged in a legalistic situation. It may not be federal court, like a true copyright complaint would take place in a federal court, but the Creative Commons are in a legalistic setting, and teachers do need to know that just because it has a Creative Commons license, they do need to honor whatever the rights are that is set by the copyright owner. The Creative Commons is layered on top of the original copyright law. So if something is in Creative Commons, and obviously if they're using something in public domain or some other phase of the original copyright law, the Creative Commons layers above it and doesn't replace original copyright law. Um, let's see, I mentioned the database for those Creative Commons cases is it's a wiki on the creativecommons.org website. That's something that you might want to look at as you before you get into a copyright situation. Again, the most important thing when you're coaching copyright to me is why do you want to use this resource? What is your ultimate goal? And usually that directs the rest of the conversation. And usually the answer, if someone asks, can I use this resource in this situation? Your response could always be, well, it depends. Maybe, because then you can take them through the steps to determine if it's fair use or copyright free to use. And then always end the conversation particularly if it's something where they're going to have to either ask for permission to use it or can't use it in the situation that they want. End the conversation with what else can we use? Is there something else that would meet the same objective as your original objective? One of the founding factors of copyright was to encourage creativity. So you always want to be sure that you're honoring that with your teachers and your students, obviously. And it is one of the tenets of open education. If you have been in any of the OER resources, those are always open for everyone to use, and that is something to always think about when you are talking about copyright, that there might be something also in an OER site that could meet those same demands. Back to if you want to further delve into some open education resources, DPI has, and through NC State, has been developing an OER source. So see what kind of state that is in at the time that you need it. Also, there's a couple YouTube videos that I will post on Inside Our Canvas for you to look at if you are further interested in the open OER resources. David Blake has done one. It's called Why Open Education Matters, and that also encourages that creativity and using lots of resources. If the final question is you still want to use the copyrighted material, or the teacher does, how do they ask for permission? So obviously, if it's a print resource or even a video, you need to find out who the copyright owner is. Usually it is a publisher of some sort or a video company, and then you need to email them is fine now. We no longer have to depend on snail mail, but definitely if you get a response, yay or nay, be sure to print it off and keep it in files so that further use of that copyrighted material can be legal if it is challenged. It usually takes time, so teachers do need to be a little proactive in their planning and try to get that permission if they really do want to. Most publishers of print resources um, have a copyright department that you can just list the ISBN and title and author and explain why you want to use it in what situation and how many copies or how many semesters of the course you would like to do. If you're doing video, if it's going to be posted on a um, YouTube channel that's open versus one that supposedly only certain people can get to, or within your learning distance system. If anything is on an open web page or on an open cable TV station, there's usually not as much excitement about granting permission in those scenarios because they're wide open to anyone's use. So, you as the media supervisor, one of your responsibilities is to help folks work through those or at least be able to refer them how to go about getting that permission. Um, Not going over the basics of copyrights because just like your school level, you've covered that in your graduate MLIS coursework. Um, And our focus in our situations is use of copyrighted materials in the classroom instruction or in library programming if there is some sort of, you know, overnight story, pajama thing, if elementary, or a lockdown for clubs, or most situations in our elementary schools in particular is using a video as rewards, having a movie night as part of the PTA. So those are all the kind of copyright situations that you may be involved in. The Both these books, Coaching Copyright and Creative Commons, explains what it means for something to be in public domain, all the different years, after the death of the author, it becomes public domain, and then how you can make variations on it, and go over that four-factor fair use guidelines, which you all pretty much know this. One, the purpose of why they want to use that copyrighted material. That's the why. Two, the nature of the copy material. What is it? Is it a video? Is it print? Is it a workbook? Is it a worksheet? Um, Three, the amount used. How much of it? You can do a video clip, but a video clip is not, 1 hour and 10 minutes of a 1 hour, 30-minute video. And four, the effect on the market. That in most cases isn't anything unless one, it's to replace workbooks or something that a textbook publisher expects you to purchase in addition to the textbook resources, or if someone's trying to dub a video or download a video instead of purchasing it, or public performance rights in terms of not getting a public performance right license if it's a entertainment or reward kind of situation. So, or recording a print book so that it becomes a read along if a read along is already available in some form or fashion. So those are those four fair use evaluations. Um, that everyone should know that are in your school board policy, and those are the four questions to help guide to that coaching situation with the teacher. Because usually by the time you get to the end, you can determine whether it's a fair use situation or if there needs to be some further steps. There is a fair use evaluator on librarycopyright.net/resources. I'll put these links on the Canvas webpage. You probably already have seen that. It's a good kind of flow of decision making. You probably have all seen the Disney mashup that is kind of snarky approach to laughing at Disney, and it just takes single words out of a variety of fairy tale Disney videos. I personally don't like to use this, even though it does add a little humor and takes the tension out of the room if you're working with a group of teachers or school media coordinators. It to me is just a little bit too flippant on the copyright issue. It is humorous, it's cute, it's clever. So if you have a group of teachers that can then switch back to some serious discussions, I think it's okay. But I'll put that link up in there too. And many of the LibGuides that are on the various university sites that have education schools, they often include this just because they, want a video clip that is will engage the teachers in thinking about, what is this copyright thing? And we're so, anti-Disney, can't use anything Disney, that you do want to be sure that um, they have a framework in which to view the video. The other thing that bothers me about I think it's called Fairy Use Tale, I think is what the actual title of that is that especially with elementary student or elementary teachers, it leaves the impression that it's okay to use Disney materials in the sense that these were all Disney things, and I've often had to um, talk back around that video at a later time when teachers want to use a Disney video for reward, um, and or a Friday afternoon release. We don't even have those anymore, do we? Um, and it just leaves the impression that Disney's okay if you use it in little bits and pieces. Um, and Wikipedia has some good just summaries of philosophy of copyright and philosophy of authors' rights. Um, and the coaching copyright also has several scenarios in throughout the book of situations that they've encountered. Some do involve university um, level instructors. And again, I say K-12 instructors have more leeway than college instructors. And also, um, students have more copyright leeway, fair use of using copyrighted materials without permission than their teachers do. So when you are instructing students, you do want to really emphasize the knowing what copyright is, citing the copyright source if they are going to use a copyrighted material, and if they're going to use it within a project like a video that is going to be distributed more widely than their classroom or within a learning management system, then they also need to be aware of the music or the copyrighted materials within that project. But students can get away with a little more copyright, but they do need to be instructed from an early level. Our standard course of study objectives standards have us addressing copyright beginning in kindergarten with ownership of ideas, and goes all the way up through 12th grade. And particularly when they are in middle school and high school, the plagiarism, the copyright, if they are in any kind of um, program for um, computer digital art or advertising or anything like that, they need to know for sure that they cannot use copyrighted materials or adapt things in the real world. And part of our objectives for our students is to prepare them for the real world. So, copyright and plagiarism and Creative Commons licensing and fair use of copyrighted materials are all terms that they should be familiar with by the time they are in middle school. And as district level media supervisors, we need to keep reminding our school library media coordinators and them, their teachers, of all of those ramifications and make sure that is an active part of instruction every year. Um, Obviously, it's best if it's incorporated within different research projects or research assignments or um, video productions that the students produce. So, particularly if there's music or images involved. You also want to be sure you know, as the media supervisor, how you search for copyright compliant resources. So you can actually go to the creativecommons.org website and they have a search.cc.org, search.creativecommons.org. And so you can type in your topic or your subject, and they will bring up different resources that are copyright compliant or have Creative Commons licenses. Also in Google, you can search, have the students search for copyright free music, copyright free PowerPoints for your teachers, copyright whatever free those so that it comes up. Now, many of those are will send you to sites that you may have to subscribe to. So if it's a student, check the age limitations or parameters. If they're asking them to create an account or something like that. Obviously, images are all over the internet, and there's several that are great for education. Pexels, Pexels.com is one that people have used, although your network within school may block it because it's a .com. There's also Pix for Learning, which has a lot of copyright education-based pictures and photos and those kinds of things. On the Pix for Learning, it also has rubrics and such that your teachers might want. So you do have to search out ones that are compatible with your school system network with their blocking. And for students, they're going to go to Google Images first. And so be sure to remind your media coordinators and your teachers to teach them how to cite those properly if they find what they need. One of the most common questions that we get at the district level is, how do I use this video for reward? Usually the most common answer is you get the performance license from Movie Licensing Association. Most public libraries pay for their that license. PTAs pay for the license. Obviously, it can be fairly expensive if you use two or three, and it's expensive on a teacher. It's usually based on either the size of the audience or how many times you're going to use it, or one-time thing, and it's anywhere from $75 to $300, depending. You can get an annual license that covers a lot of different video publishers. If you want to use a reward program, they just need to get the license. Also, have a conversation with your English language arts colleagues at central office and see if they support or recommend as a best practice or not as a best practice the tradition of reading a novel and then showing a video and then comparing and contrasting. So over the last 10 years, that's been kind of frowned upon by ELA folks. That's not really worth the time, or it's not a rigorous assignment. Um, However, if they wanted to show a scene from a video that is either true to the novel or the exact opposite of the novel, and then have the kids critique or answer a prompt that addresses more of a higher level thinking skill than just a storyline kind of question. So those are academic reasons why they might not want to show a video in a classroom. They also could assign the video as homework, watching from home, if the students have a way to access it at home, and then base activities in the classroom based on them having watched it as homework or something, but never post a video, um, an entire commercial video inside a learning management system unless you have permission to do that. Briefly, we could talk about the Netflix or Prime Video licenses. Netflix will not, at least at this time, put in writing that you cannot use your personal Netflix license to show a video in class. That is for home use only. They do state that they will tell you over the phone that that license is only for home use. So that is something that you might want to discuss with the school system lawyer and write it into a policy or an AR, an administrative regulation, if that is a problem or a big problem. Some teachers do that more than others, so maybe it's not worth doing a school system discussion of it. So that is one of our digital answers coming down the line. I know Netflix is creating an educational section, which will have free licensing of educational videos, so that aren't entertainment or rated. So those are all things to be aware of when you step into that central office role. Um, that pretty much concludes it for copyright and Creative Commons. Just some heads up things, nothing that you probably didn't already know. You do want to keep a little bit of your attention to those open educational resources now as we move more and more to digital online um, teaching. In the Creative Commons for educators and librarians, there is about a 3-page discussion of open education resources as it relates to the Creative Commons licenses, and also a good few paragraphs on how you evaluate open education resources. Just because they're free doesn't mean that they are inferior to paid resources. So you do want to go through regular selection, just like you would any other instructional resources, and as you should for videos and all the other resources that are in these OERs. There's also a couple pages on MARC records for OERs resources and different metadata that you might need in these OER databases in order to search for resources by topic. David Wiley is kind of the OER guru on that, and he's got a couple videos about this high quality scenario in OER. So I'll post those links on the Canvas webpage as well. One is the stop saying high quality in your open content kind of things. So with those OERs, again, just like any other resource, you're going to want to make sure that to evaluate the accuracy of the resource, the reputation of the author or the institution that has created that resource or deposited that resource. You need the standard of technical production. Many of them have digital formats, and so you're going to want to be sure that those are high quality and that they are compatible to your learning management system or your network. How accessible are they? How many clicks down does it take to get to the resource? And then obviously the fitness for the purpose, particularly for classroom instructions. There's a lot of libguides on fair use and copyright. And Creative Commons. Those are usually pretty comprehensive, so they might be more for your resource or for your school library media coordinators than for teachers and or students. But definitely take a look at those. Excuse me. And those might be all you need to do to complete the copyright assignment that for this class. I think that's it for this. Signing off.